Welcome to another episode of the Founders Lounge, where I talk to founders of various businesses to share their stories, learn their lessons, and hopefully inspire some more people to start their own business. In today's episode, my guest is Ryan McDaid. He's a very good friend of mine. We're actually living together for about 2 years or so here in London. And he has a very interesting story. So his first business was actually creating fake IDs, which, disclaimer, is illegal and you should not do that. But he tells the whole story. It's interesting. There are numerous lessons that he took away from that. And then after that, he went on to start a obviously much more legitimate business in the phones industry. And that went on to being very successful. And they were doing around 10 million in revenue towards the end. And then he decided to take a back seat, focus on some other things. So his business is still running, but he's now focused on other things. He's in the property business for the last few years. So we talked about that as well. And we talked about a bunch of other lessons that he learned along the way. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. And if you do, and if you want to hear more stories like this, that's a good time to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever it is that you like to listen to your podcasts. Now enjoy the episode. All right, Ryan, finally, after a few months, welcome to the Founders Lounge.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely a pleasure. So, Ryan, you are now one of my closest friends currently, and you're coming to my wedding. We've lived together for like 2 years or so. And I was thinking before we started recording, I was thinking about how we met, and I think that that's a cool story as well. We should talk about. We met at this place called Startup Home, which I hope we get to talk about because I think it's a really cool concept and I'd love to talk a little bit more about it. And I remember the first night when we met, and I think we were like talking until, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. maybe, just talking about life and business. And it's really, I still remember that night. And one thing that I'll never forget is how I kept talking about my own business adventures. And that was soon after I moved from Switzerland to London, I think. And in Switzerland, I had this startup and we raised $500,000 in funding. And that was like interesting. And I guess I was quite proud of it. And I talked about it and you seemed really impressed. And I didn't know at that point that you built a business in Ireland, which was way more successful than that. I was doing like 10 million or so in revenue, which we're going to talk about as well. And I only learned about that later. And I was like, wow, okay, that's way more than I've ever achieved business-wise, right? So I guess that's a little bit of a teaser for everyone who's listening for what we will eventually get to talk about. But it's a pleasure to have you here and to finally talk about your story and to share your story. And I thought we could start with how your business life kind of started, your first business ventures. What was that, if you can share a little bit, and then we'll get to the other bigger businesses afterwards.
Cool. So again, thanks for having me. Great finally to come on. I know you've asked me before, but do be nervous with these kind of things. But so I think for me, going back to like my first ventures was like in secondary school or high school, where the students come together and have like a trade show for like a one-day event where everyone gets to come with their ideas and sell whatever it is. And on that day, I came with 2 games, and it was basically like you play to have a go, and then whoever gets the highest score would win a prize at the end of the day, and the prize was like €50 or something like that. And that was kind of like my first taste, and I made a few hundred on the day, and then to top it off, I also won the event, which was not expected at all. And then that was like another 500. So I came home a happy boy that day, and that was like my first real taste. And I was around the age of maybe 14, 15. So that was fun. And then what led on to was which would probably be my first business in a sense of making money and on a sustainable level, but not legal, was selling fake IDs.
All right, before we continue, I want to take a second to talk about our sponsor. I've always been saying that one of the best ways to learn about business is by working closely with a smart and successful entrepreneur, and this might be your opportunity. Our sponsor is a company called Judge Me. Judge Me is a Shopify product review plugin, and they're the number one plugin on Shopify. They're literally, if you look at the Shopify App Store, they're in the first spot. They're bootstrapped, and they managed to outcompete other companies that raised hundreds of millions of dollars by just being smarter and building a better product. They were started by PJ, who was also a guest on the Founders Lounge, episode 54, so I recommend you to check it out. They recently moved their headquarters to London, and they're looking for smart people to join them. They're looking for product managers, engineers, and they're looking to fill other roles as well. So check out careers.judge.me and see if you find any role that you like and apply. So that's careers.judge.me. Now, enjoy the rest of the episode. Disclaimer, don't do this at home. If you don't want to get in trouble, which you did a little bit, but I think it's a funny story, the whole thing. So
yeah. So don't. I do not advise anyone to do this because you're playing with the law. So I was 16 at the time. I was 15 before I knew I was going to do it because it was waiting hard to get my own driver license. So you can get your provisional driving license at 16. I had already started playing with other people's licenses at the age of 15 just to get an idea. But then when I got my own, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to try this out now and see how I get on. And so I got my provisional, made a fake driving license, an Irish driving license, and then that I brought it into school to show my friends, and then of course everyone's like, "Oh, I want one," and then it just blew up. So that was when I was 16. So I would have been in, I think, fourth year, which was my second last year, and I just started selling them for like €25, and then as time went on, I started charging more, and then that was fourth year, and then into fifth year, and I was making a good wage. I was happy. I had a summertime job as well, and then I was making these in the evening and while I was at school. And this went right through into fifth year, and it was busy. And it spread from in my local area. Then there's like other schools that in the town, and then the word spreads, and I was making them then from the ages of 16, 17, and I was making a significant amount of money. I was happy with it. I had a job as well as earning with that, so I had a good income. And then I turned 18, and then I was just like the interest had kind of gone away from it, and then like 19, I was still being asked for them, but my heart wasn't in it. But I was still making them, and eventually, then I think, it was probably going to catch up with me someday. I was still doing these, and but that's what happened. Then someone got caught. They told the Garda, which is the Irish police, and then the Garda came to my home, which is my parents' home, and they came with a search warrant and raided the house to find my computer.
So that's when you had to shut down the business.
Yeah, unfortunately, closed was on the door then.
And if I remember correctly, even still years later, you were still getting some inquiries, right?
Yeah, like as recent as 2 years ago, I still get people still message me like, "Do you still make fake IDs?" I'm like, but this is people who are looking for like driving licenses who don't have a driving license to drive on the road. Where I was just making them for me and my friends and all the kids who were 16 and 17 who just wanted to get into over 18 clubs. That's all it was. Like I wasn't trying to evade the law as such, just for ourselves, So
it sounds like there are a few lessons there. So you've clearly kind of learned a lesson about word of mouth and branding, because you had a strong brand there, and that's, that was your main marketing channel, I suppose.
Yeah.
And
word of mouth. Yeah. Sorry.
No, probably a bunch of other lessons. I mean, maybe even how I guess it's fine to be a little bit cheeky sometimes, especially in the beginnings when you're starting something. That was certainly one of my takeaways from, this story and some of the other stories that we talked about in the past. Do you think there are any other lessons that you took from, well, maybe also don't do illegal things, I guess. Were there any other lessons that you took from that, and, then applied, or that kind of influence how you did business after that?
I think for me it was when you have a product that works, then people are going to buy it, so my first experience in that was I made them, they worked, people told everyone, and it just kept going and going and going and going and going. And that was probably the biggest lesson that I learned from it. But I also learned from it that it's not really what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but I was like so stuck in it that I felt like I couldn't say no. It's like I didn't want to do it anymore at the age of 18 or 19, but I did it anyway, So, that was obviously trying to keep it on the down low as well was a little tricky, And I suppose, you do have to be a little bit cheeky, The law is there for a reason, and it's a guideline to keep everyone safe and to keep everything within a structure. But also, like, if you're not truly hurting anyone, if you're not going out to do damage to people or steal from people or anything like that, then I'm not saying to go break the law, but I'm just like, the law is a guideline and follow it. But also there is times in business where you're going to take chances, and I think that's normal for everything in business at the start when you're trying to get going.
It's such an interesting topic, and honestly, that's one thing that I've learned from you, because we had those kind of conversations, and there's this the fake ID business, but also like other things, and I've had other guests. Even just the last episode, right, was a really interesting guy, Joss, who is in some way, and I told you, he's in some ways similar to you. He's very good at just finding opportunities and just kind of innovating or like moving really fast, kind of hustling his way in those early stages of a business, right? And sometimes you're not sure if something you're doing is legal or if it's 100% correct, if you're doing everything according to the rules. But also, one thing I've learned is, well, rules change, right? Sometimes the rules are not necessarily 100% right? I mean, laws change, regulations change, and they change for a reason. Somebody puts that in place. They don't consider all the different aspects. Regulators make mistakes just like everyone else, which is not the way I used to see the world. Because in my worldview, I used to be, even more than now, very much, follow the rules, whatever the rules, that's how you need to do it. But I don't know. I think I've changed a little bit over the years. Like, well, sometimes the rules are just stupid. And sometimes, as you said, I mean, it's true. Again, not to say that you should break the law. Absolutely not. Don't hurt anyone. Absolutely not. I think you should do things that are, ethical, and, you should stick to a certain level of ethics and moral. But you do need to be a little bit cheeky, especially in the beginning, especially when you have low scale. You don't hurt anyone. You just need to figure shit out, basically, right?
Yes, for sure. And the law isn't going to be changed until people actually fight the law, whatever that is, And there's even a documentary there about Spotify. You're aware of that story?
No, I'm not sure what you mean.
With he tried to change the music industry, and he had to go against what the law said, and that was to basically bring a streaming platform online, and then eventually the laws changed, So it's like, yes, they're there and they're a guideline, but they're just a guideline, and it's up to you how you try and navigate that rule or whatever that guideline is to your benefit.
Yeah, really agree. I think it's something that's worth thinking about, especially if you're kind of like me, who thinks that the law is the only right thing to do. And again, yes, follow the law. Don't hurt anyone. Don't do anything stupid.
Correct.
But also be ethical, but also use your mind, I guess. Use your critical mind to think about when something is the right thing to do and sometimes and when it's not. moving on. So then, okay, so you shut down your fake ID business, and then what came up next then?
So yeah, to be honest, I was happy about that. I just wanted to move on from that, and so I went to college. I studied civil engineering, and then in my third year, I exams were going good, etc. But so I had an interest in technology, and I wanted to buy a mobile phone, which I could buy, but was really expensive. So I always wanted like a SIM-free / unlocked phone where you can just pop any SIM card in and away you go. Because at the time it was like strictly network locked phones only, and I could buy it, but it was expensive. And I was like, surely there is a cheaper option because the networks are selling these phones for a lot less, but it's locked. I'm like, well, what if I could sell it similar to the networks? As in similar price but unlocked. So that kind of left me thinking, and then went on a search and to try and find some suppliers who would sell these phones where I could sell them on for a profit and still at a really good price. So that was that. I was in third year in college, and then so what I did is I found suppliers, and then I started advertising them the devices that were popular at the time. And back then it was like pretty much Nokia. They were big. They were the Apple of the day, and them and Sony Ericsson, etc. So started selling them on this platform called Dundee, which is kind of like eBay, Gumtree, which is an Irish. They're an Irish version. It's very popular. It's very simple, easy to use. So for me, it was like, let's go and test it out, sell them on the platform, pre-sell them, see does people have any interest. They put down a deposit, then I would go buy from the supplier and then give them a lead time of like 7 to 10 days. And they were happy with that. So I was able to test it out. And then the first week I sold one phone, and then second week maybe 3 phones. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, which led on to setting up a website to sell them through the website then, where people could actually place the orders. So that was like Christmas '09 or something like that there. And then just testing out, and then just kept getting busier and busier. It was a market that wasn't penetrated. There was no one doing this at the time. So that led on to a lot of people asking about, do you have a store? Do you have a location? And then leading to opening a store in Galway City, September 2020, which would be over 12 years ago now. So that was kind of, 2010, there we go. So a long time ago. And yeah, well, what seems a long time ago, but wasn't that long actually. So that was like getting it from the ground to actually getting off the ground to a physical store.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is interesting. We've talked about that in the past because I'm a very digital guy, right? So everything's very much online for me and remote and just digital, yeah. So physical store is like, it's a commitment and it's like an expense and you need to set it all up. And I think even most of the people that I've had on the podcast, they were more digital. They had an office. So, most of the guys, I guess most of them had an office, but the products, even if they sell physical products, they would usually be e-commerce founders, right? So they don't actually have a store. How was that experience for you? For me, it's kind of a big deal in my eyes. You're like, 20 years old, opening a store. There's an investment, I guess, like a significant investment required as well.
Yeah. So at this time then, I went into business with someone. So we kind of had a good team in the sense of two of us, because he had worked in retail, and obviously I kind of had started to develop the knowledge of the phone game, which I had a huge interest in anyway. So I kind of enjoyed it, So that definitely took off like a huge weight off me, being able to spread that workload with experience. And yeah, it just kind of rolled. It was tough at the start. There was an investment. Fortunately, there was already a phone shop in the unit that we had taken. So we didn't have to spend that much money to kind of make it like a phone shop. We just kind of put new graphics on, saving as much money as we could without, like, literally just new stickers. That's all it was. We kept all the fixtures and fittings. We bought a lot of dummy phones, kept all the phones secure in a press at the back. So we managed to get it off the ground pretty smoothly. The biggest investment at the start was the rent. Like, that was a huge amount to me. It was like, whoa, that's a lot of money at the start, having to invest that much. And that it took a few years to kind of get it going. You know, at the start it was like, it was selling new phones only, and the profit on new phones wasn't much. It was like, because you were competing with the networks who were subsidizing their phones so that they get you on your contract, whereas we're trying to sell a phone with a profit only. So the first few years were tough, but it was all about building the brand, giving exceptional customer service. Like, that is what we pride ourselves on, was like giving superior customer service and in that personal touch, because people do like that in retail. Whereas, like, they're coming in and they're meeting the owner and chatting to the owner, and you know, we all like that. And with the networks, you don't get that because it's that multinational feeling, you know. So that was definitely a huge benefit for us. And there was so many other different things. The market was starting to grow. It's like the smartphones started to come, and then they were so expensive at the time, and not everyone could afford a new phone. So then the market started to change, where pre-owned phones started to become a thing, and people were going to buy a pre-owned iPhone or a pre-owned Samsung, etc. So we started testing that out. That was maybe like 2 to 3 years in, and it was like going from 100% new to like 90% new to 80%, and so on and so forth. So as time went on, we were changing with how the market was going, and we were riding that wave. And because we were there first, there was nobody to compete with us, and that definitely had a huge benefit of getting there first and riding that wave of the smartphone. So yeah, that was it. We went with the pre-owned then, and as time went on, we just integrated it more and more and more and more.
Can you talk a little bit more about the branding and the superior customer experience? The reason why, so I think you mentioned a few times that that's something that you feel like you guys were pretty good at, and that you personally are pretty good at building a brand. And the reason why that's interesting is because, so I think you know, obviously, as you said, you were riding the wave, right? So the smartphones were just starting, and you guys were just there at the right place at the right time, and you were able to jump on that trend, right? But competing against the big global corporations, or like the telcos, right? It's you need something. You need an edge. You need something that's going to make you different. It's going to make you better. And you mentioned branding, but yeah, if you can talk a little bit more about it, because I think it's interesting to hear some specifics there.
Yeah, with branding, I suppose,
and with customer, like that really better customer support and customer service.
Yeah. So with branding was, I would say, consistency across the board. So with our logo, our colors, having all of that right through in everything that we do, our packaging, our bags, just having consistency was so important across the board. And then customer service was hearing out every single time a customer had an issue or whatever it was, or whatever they were looking for, going that extra step. Because if you go that extra step, the chances are that customer is going to come back to you because you did that little bit extra for them. Because it's my own company, I am able to do that because I care that much. And it's hard for larger companies to do that because not everyone has the same love for it. Now, don't get me wrong, there is definitely people out there who do work in them jobs and do have that love. But me showing up every single day, I was able to have that every single time with every single customer.
It reminds me, I'll never forget when I was talking to PJ, our mutual friend, right? So PJ was on the podcast as well a few episodes ago. He's running Judge Me, right? He's the founder of Judge Me. And he was telling me that in the first few years, I think, when it was just him and his co-founder in a very small team, and he also always believed that exceptional customer experience is going to be their edge or part of their edge. And he would wake up in the middle of the night when they received like a negative review, or if they received a complaint, he would wake up in the middle of the night just to respond to that as soon as possible to provide really that exceptional customer experience. And well, I mean, it worked for him. It worked for you as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like anytime someone was unhappy, I would always hear them out and always give the benefit of the doubt, regardless. Like if it's a decision that you can't really determine, well, like I'm like, okay, just give them the benefit of the doubt, because the chances are that they will come back again. And it's worth having that customer and not making money or even losing money on that sale than not having them at all. So that was kind of the mentality that I applied. And with the reviews, yeah, I was always on the reviews, always, it's probably, I don't like saying this, impossible, but it is very, very challenging to have a 100% customer satisfaction, but that didn't mean that I would always strive towards that. And there's just some people that you're not going to be able to please, but it's always having the attitude of you will try. And I think if you can apply that attitude to everything you do with every single customer, then the chances are that you're going to have a successful business, because your customer feedback is the most important part of your business.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so you guys opened, was it 3 shops in total?
So,
right?
Yeah, we opened 3, and then we opened 2 more just before the pandemic. And then we ended up closing them 2 down. Then it just was not good timing, and hey, it was lessons learned. And so we still have the 3 stores at the moment. Yeah.
Cool. And okay, so the business was growing consistently. Were there any things that were like a major unlock for your business? They were like a major growth moment, or was it just a consistent, just little by little, store by store, e-commerce slowly growing?
Yeah, I think definitely taking yourself from working in the business to working on the business. So like if there's a circle, if you're working in the business, it's going to be very challenging for that circle to get any bigger. But when you step outside the circle and you start working on the business, then you can start to, grow that circle. And that circle can be locations, it can be team members, revenue, whatever it is. And getting good people in behind you who are able to do the roles that that you've been doing, ensuring that the systems are in place, procedures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a growth point for me too, was right, okay, I need to get systems in place if I want to expand and I want to grow, and developing that for the managers to come in. And then we also moved to an office, which was very much needed at the time, because we're handling like so many phones on a daily basis, and we were like working in this tiny, tiny room. Like, so we had our store in Galway, and then above that, 2 floors up, we had 3 storerooms, and we'd converted one of them to an office, and there was no windows or nothing. Like it was so tight, but we were all working in there, and there was like maybe 10 of us in there. We had technicians, so that was kind of like our first head office. No ventilation. It was like not healthy, but it was like the best that we could do. We made it work, it was perfect. We had all our shelving up, we had all our devices. We were very much like saving money all the time, which was like, we even had an ice cream shop across from us. So we would get their used ice cream buckets so that we could stack all of our phones inside them, just trying to save money where we could, compromising where we could. And there was shelving already there. So it's kind of like using the resources that you have and are available to you. So that was that. But then that just it definitely got too crammed. So we then moved to a location just outside the city, and we were able to put a proper storeroom and have like a safe for all the phones, secured, locked away, and then have an office, etc. And then manage our online store more efficiently as well. And with our team then for marketing, etc., etc. So that was probably around maybe 2015, 2016, I think. So maybe 5 years into the business. And then things just went up again. It just started getting busier and busier and busier because we were able to manage more effectively and work better with the team.
Yeah, that's something I hear often, working on the business, not in the business, right? Because it's easy. Well, firstly, as you said, also, it's kind of a mindset shift, and you need to learn different skills and to remove yourself from those day-to-day details and really focus on growing the business and the strategy instead of, being involved in every little detail and in every single part of the business. There's another story that I remembered now as you were talking about this, humble beginning. Actually, I shouldn't say humble beginnings, but trying to save money and trying to be, just smart with how you're spending. The story of Craigslist is very interesting, right? So Craigslist is, it's like, how do you call that? Classified ads website that's probably 20 plus years old. I think they're global, but they're mostly popular in the US. And that business does hundreds of millions in revenue. I think if they're not even at close to $1 billion in revenue, they have a team of 50-ish people. For a very long time, they were in this shitty small office where, like, I remember correctly, they had like desks made out of, they're not even like proper desks, right? They're like desks made out of something else. And they're just like really, really trying to save as much money as possible. It's not because they're not profitable. They're crazy profitable. But I think that was kind of their objective. They're like, well, we don't really need more. And so why would we spend more if we don't need it? And I think in the beginning, even more so, right? It's like, well, a flashy office maybe is like good for your ego and it looks nice. But if you are like wasting a lot of money around the business, I think that's kind of the impression that you create also for all your employees, right? It's like, well, are we trying to like save and just focus on profitability and reinvesting into the actual business, or are we going to be spending on things that, at the end of the day, don't necessarily make a difference, right? And yeah, I think Craigslist is a fantastic example of that.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that, it reminds me of Amazon too. Jeff Bezos and his office, he just has a spray sign,
Yeah, there's this famous photo, right?
Yes. So I think it's very important to never lose that ever, because you can get caught up with making more money and then wanting to spend. And then it definitely can be an ego factor for sure. So it's just kind of separating that and realizing, well, does it benefit or does it not?
Yep. Okay. And then, sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, that was it. Like, and so we, like my partner at the time, so he definitely brought a lot more experience and he was able to share some of that with me, which I learned from him as well, so like staying humble with what you have.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. So then we're in like 2020 or so, just before the pandemic started. How big was the business at that point?
So that was just before the pandemic. I think we had a team of like 50 over across the stores, and like the revenue that you mentioned, which is just revenue. That was kind of like where the business was. We were just thriving at that time. And we had really good people, like excellent people working with us, I have to say. Just want to say thank you guys, if any of you listening. But like we really did grow with a great team, and it allowed us to elevate to that level. And the pandemic hit, and it was just a huge shift in terms of management, because all the stores were closed. But our online store, it boomed. I think everywhere across the world boomed at that time. So it was an interesting phase. And at that stage, then I just had taken a back seat. So just as the pandemic had started, because I felt like a change.
So talk a little bit more about that. I think in some ways that's really fascinating, right? A lot of people dream about starting $1 million business or million pound, million euro, whatever. I think when you actually do that, a million is like a number that's, for some reason, it's the goal for many people, right? I think in often you realize, actually, I wonder what you think about this, but I think when you actually have a business like yours and you have a lot of expense, you need to buy the stock and you have employees and you need to pay for advertising. $1 million in revenue is not even necessarily a lot after all the expenses. After all the expenses, the profit that's left there for you or for the founders, we're not talking about very large numbers. It's not something that's going to make you really wealthy, right? But I guess that's one milestone, and the next milestone is like 10 million in revenue, which is already more sort of ambitious, and you reach that kind of number as well. And then you said, well, now I'll like take a back seat and focus on other things. And I do think that that's like the dream for a lot of founders. Like, well, I want to build something, and I think a lot of us are kind of also driven by just achievement, right? It's like you want to achieve something, you want to create something, and you do that, and then you're like, well, okay, but now I want to maybe focus on something else. And if you can talk a little bit more about that, but also if you're able to share a little bit about the, what was the kind of deal that you then made in the business with your co-founder?
Yeah. So I definitely, before I hit the milestones, they're like, whoa, but then when you hit them, you're like, it all comes down to profit. Like, and revenue really isn't that big of a deal, because you could have that much revenue, have zero profit, so you put that backside. But also I got to the stage, it was like, I just felt the need for a change. I had someone who was working with me and doing an excellent job, could do everything that I could do. There were systems in place, and my heart wasn't in it anymore. It was just like, why am I doing this? It was just the same. And I also just wasn't feeling good. It's just like, I have enough money, but I wasn't enjoying it. And then the weekends, I just wanted to look forward to the weekends to go out. That's all I wanted to do. During the week, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. And it was like an existential crisis. Like, what is life? Like, what is this all about? And I just needed that change. So I made the decision to take a step back from what I was doing, made an agreement with my co-partner, and said, I'm going to, head off, going to look at other things. The agreement we made is we're still 50-50 owners, and then because he's managing the company, then there's more share his way. So we came to a fair agreement that we're both happy with, and still have a great business relationship, and still talk, every week, because I still have an interest in the business. But I've let him fully manage, and he's been doing an excellent job since I've left. So that's kind of what happened in that transition from building it from when I was that age, 20 or so, to like 30, but also realizing how much do I actually need? Why am I doing this? It just set me off in a different path, and asking more questions, but very fortunate and grateful for what I got out of that experience, and definitely given me a sense of security in life that going forward into the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so that was also the moment when you moved over to London, right?
That's right, yeah. So it was the pandemic. Ireland was shut down, and Ireland was so much stricter than the UK. And I seen that UK was still getting open. I was like, well, okay, maybe I'll go over there and just see what it's like, and try a few different things. And went over there, tried out a coding course just to try and see if I had an interest in software development, etc. And with a few other ideas as well. And it was fun. I met you. in Startup Home, and Startup Home was a great place. A great place.
Startup home is interesting, yeah. So I'm not sure if I ever talked about it here on the podcast, but it's like, well, for everyone who's listening, so it's like this place that unfortunately now it doesn't exist anymore as far as I know, but it was this house in London with 10 people living together. So it was like a big house, 10 rooms, a lot of, a bunch of bathrooms and kitchens and like a big rooftop terrace. So it was like pretty big, pretty spacious. Shockingly spacious, shockingly quiet, I would say, considering how many people there were there. Because if you think about it now, it's like, oh my God, 10 people living together. It sounds like a mess. But it really wasn't a mess. It was really cool.
It was
And
cool.
yeah, everyone was a startupper, right? So everyone either had their own business or they worked for a startup or they at least had a pretty strong interest to start a business. And it was cool. It was great. So, I mean, some of my best friends in London now I met them in Startup Home, right? So, and yeah, including
Yes.
you and PJ, who was on the podcast and who's sponsoring the podcast now, and including a bunch of others. And I think it was such a cool concept because, man, you were just constantly surrounded by like-minded people. And we always, like, I remember when I was hanging out with my friends who are not from the business space, I think they often get a little bit annoyed about me because I'm like, well, business is the only thing that I want to talk about, right? Yeah, life as well. You know, sometimes we get very philosophical about life and psychology and all that. But for the most part, I don't know, like business is what interests me. And a lot of my life is around that. And it's work and business. And those are the kind of topics, right? And at Startup Home, well, that was just a normal subject of conversations all the time. If it was like Sunday 9 a.m. or Friday 3 a.m. before we went to bed, you know, you could always have an interesting conversation with some like-minded individuals. And I do actually think that that's a large part of what life is all about. Just be around people who are interesting and, I guess, fun to hang out with, and people who also push you forward, right? People who are like ambitious, if that's what you want in life. And I guess not necessarily everyone wants to that, but it's just that sense of community and people who you can also learn from and support each other and so on. So I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great because it's good to be in a space where people are sharing similar goals. So like some people are just not interested in business and they're just not, you can love each other, but just not truly understand each other because you don't have the same goals. So being in that space and surrounded like by the likes of you and everyone else is exploring different ideas, it helps motivate you too. And you can, if
It
you have
does.
a challenge, you can come and talk about it in a group, whatever. And yeah, it was fun. It was great, man. I was very grateful for that
Yeah.
experience and the time that I lived there. It was great.
Likewise. I'm looking forward to seeing a few years from now what else comes from the Startup Home alumni network. Because I mean, obviously, you know, we had PJ who has like massively successful business. We had Fred who's, you know, building robots, and I think there's still a
Yes.
huge potential with his business as well. We had David, who I'm not sure if you've met David, but he built
No, I didn't
like
meet David.
calendar scheduling / chatting app, which I'm not entirely sure how it's doing right now, but I know it had some good potential as well. Well, I had Al, a bunch of people who are building something. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what else comes out of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I haven't spoke to Peter in a little while, but yeah, it's great to see how he has evolved from that time to now. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, a lot of things started there. Cool. Where should we? So, okay. So let's talk about more the recent. Recent. So I know that you're okay. One thing that you're interested in is also property, right? So that's one of the things that you're doing right now.
Yeah, so in the last few years, I invested it in property before I came to London, and yeah, it's been interesting. I come from a background, so, like who does some investment in that. So I always had an interest in doing that, and I bought a few properties, and then started Airbnb last year, and then that kind of led on to the government then looking for property for refugees. So in the last few months, then I took the properties from Airbnb. I like just took them offline and then started to enroll in the government with the refugee program. So that has been an interesting experience because as much as it's business, you're also helping people who are coming from war, like coming from places where they don't even have a
Mm-hmm.
home, so like that is fulfilling in a sense. It's not just business. It's like you're actually helping people, and that's kind of where life has brought me in the last few years. I think having a kid as well, that was a huge factor. I think just a huge wake up call. It's like, whoa. So probably more in touch with my feelings in a sense, and yeah, so that's been nice. So we have taken in like around 100 at the
Mm-hmm.
moment, 100 refugees between a few different locations. So working through the government, and I don't know how long they will be here or what the process is, but for now they're taken in on a contract basis with the government, and then it's our responsibility to ensure that all their needs are
Mm-hmm.
met. So just ensure that they're living in a comfortable environment, that they have whatever needs, be it doctor,
Uh-huh.
school, they have to go to the hospital. Like yesterday, for example, a girl student, she broke her leg. So it's like, it's our responsibility to ensure that they're brought to hospital, etc. So there's a lot of responsibility comes with it. It's
Mm-hmm.
busy. So, but we have a good team here with us.
Wow. Fascinating. So property is another property is another thing that you and I always had a different opinion about, right? To an extent. So obviously you come from
Yeah.
as you said, a background where your family has some properties, and now you're involved with that as well. I was always like, oh no, man, sounds like such a headache, like, and all those all those physical properties that you need to that you need to own. I think I'll get into
Yeah.
property when metaverse becomes a bigger thing. That, that sounds like
uh,
more my kind of a
you,
thing.
Yeah, it definitely can be busy. But like I think it's just what you're willing to work with, and there's a part of me that actually enjoys it as well. So like that is if I'm enjoying it, then I'm happy to do it. I've also looked at stocks and investing and stuff, but I just don't know if it's something that I want to do on a daily
Mm,
basis kind of thing, in terms of investing and stuff. And you know what, for me as well, it's like, how much do I actually need? I am content with what I have right now. And that for me is nearly like, if everything stays afloat, which is cool, then I see it kind of as a long term
mm,
investment where I'm secure no matter what I do. And it's like, for me, it's really coming back to what is it that I can do to help people, help humanity,
mm,
which I think we've discussed before. It's like, for me, it's kind of doing a full circle, and it's like, I genuinely think that there can be more love in the world, and that has kind of led me down the road of, kind of mentoring and coaching, helping people work through their own challenges, because there's so many people out there who are doing so well in business, but then are also disconnected from themselves. And it's like, me working with them people, which is what I'm doing as well. That is them understanding themselves more, because I'm working on myself and understanding myself to a bigger depth. Then I'm able to share that with others, and then they're able to go on and apply that to themselves, and then their business, because like business and personal life, they're not separate. Everything
Mm-hmm.
is one, despite people thinking they're different, but they're not. It's you are always everything is anything that you do is personal. So it's so important for people to show up for themselves so that they can show up in everything they do. And it's working with that. And that's been enjoyable, shining light onto things and people that, maybe don't see themselves, and just creating more self-awareness is what I should say.
So that's an interesting topic as well. So you mentioned, being more self-aware. I think, I don't remember what exactly was it. Did you use the phrase like being more in touch with your emotions maybe? And I think sometimes in business, it's really useful if you're not in touch with your emotions because and I mean, there are examples of that, right? Sometimes it's really hard, right? And sometimes a customer is going to be really upset at you, inevitably. Like you're going to mess something up, or someone's going to misunderstand something, or, an employee is going to be upset at you, or like you make mistakes, right? And it's really hard. And I had to learn sometimes to detach myself from that, because you can't, when that's happening, you can't be like, oh my God, this is like so sad. Like, no, you just need to like think clearly and be like, okay, we need to move on, right? I need to solve this problem, and I cannot be too emotional about it because I need to move on. Or like we need to solve the problem, and like the business needs to keep running. And maybe that one particular thing that feels very emotional right now is not as bad as it feels like. So in a way, sometimes being too in touch with your emotions almost feels like bad for the business. I wonder how you think about it. Do you think at this point you kind of disagree with that? Or I'm just curious, what are your thoughts?
I think when I reflect on my time in business, I think if I was more in touch with my emotions, that I could have shared that with others in a sense. Not that I was not in touch, but the more I understand myself, the more I understand others. And then the fact that I'm able to understand others even more, then I feel that you can build a stronger team because you're understanding them even more. Because like through the experience in phone company phones, I learned that like not everyone, no two people see the same no matter what. And sometimes we can get caught up in our own perception, and that is the only perception, but it's not. And there's a million different ways of looking at one situation, and it's always about coming together with your perceptions and understanding each other. So I feel like going back now, I think that would have been more beneficial, and to myself as well, with everything that I did, but it's not that I regret. It's just reflecting on my time. And I'm sure in another 10 years time I'll reflect on these next 10 years and constantly evolve. So yeah, I think if humans, if we can work on ourselves as much as we can at a younger age, like from a teenager, and understand ourselves deeply, our emotions, the way we apply ourselves going forward into whatever job, career, business you start, that the more work you do on yourself and understand yourself, the better you will be able to apply yourself in whatever it is that you want to do. Establishing your values, your boundaries, your passions, and really being fulfilled in whatever it is that you want to do.
It's interesting. Yeah. No, I think I agree. Certainly when it comes to understanding people and understanding their point of view, and because, I mean, obviously you're also not always right? And sometimes, obviously the customer is right or the employee is right, very often probably. So it's important to understand that. And I guess there's a kind of a skill, maybe not in not feeling your emotions, but in just seeing things for what they really are, right? Because, man, I remember when I mentioned like a customer being upset before, right? I remember the first, on any business or anything that I tried, man, when we got the first kind of customer complaint, I was like, oh my God, we're doing everything wrong. This is so shit. I need to rethink everything. But it's not. But for that one customer who complained, you got like 100 customers who are really happy. that, I mean, probably many of them were like quiet about it, and a few of them they actually told you that it was really good. But it's like that one customer who like messes up your day. Yeah, I guess there's a skill in just seeing things for what they really are. Well, just one, and yeah, inevitably you make mistakes. So you shouldn't let that affect you too much.
Yeah, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking of like when I was working in the store, the retail store. As you know, our mobile phones are literally, it's a third arm, or it's a limb at this stage. Like, we're so dependent on it. So when customers came in and their phone wasn't working, they were angry. Like, they were so angry. And that was one of the biggest learning experiences for me. Is like, I needed to understand that I wasn't the problem. And it was like a flat tire, or a tire. First of all, they come in and it's full of air, and you just let them say until there's nothing left in that tire and it's flat, and they've said everything, and just literally just stand there and let the breeze, blow past you and not take it on board. That was probably one of the biggest learning experiences for me, is to not take on other people's problems, because although they were coming in with the problem with the phone, they were probably coming in with other issues that was going on at home, whether it be relationship, family, money, whatever it is, and I didn't realize that at the time. But, if I don't think we should ever take our anger out on other people, and some people don't understand that, and that was what I experienced a lot of. And I even had a guy attack me one time because he couldn't translate what he had to say, different language, and his wife was there and she was trying to translate, and then he just attacked me, and then we ended up like getting into like a fight, a somewhat scuffle in the shop. And and then so this was happening because he had been like roaring in the shop for like 10-15 minutes, and then he came back a half an hour later and then it had gathered a crowd outside the shop, and there was like all these students recording it on the phone. And then when I got home the next day, one of the students next door to me goes, "Ryan, were you fighting in the shop?" And I was like, "How'd you know that?" And he goes, "Because I saw a video." I was like, "Oh, Christ." So like, but you just have to see the funny side of things too, which every side has a funny side, or every story has a funny side.
Well, especially when you look back on it after a while.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe immediately after, it's not necessarily so obvious. And that's an interesting topic that I actually think about quite a bit, which is so there's this quote that I heard a while ago by, I don't know who, but somebody said that business is the best vehicle for personal growth. And I'm curious, actually, I don't know if you and I ever talked about that. I'm curious how you think about it, because I really believe that. I think that business is hard, and I think that life is full of challenges. I don't want to say hard, but full of challenges. And I think to overcome those challenges, you need to build certain skills and a thick skin and, certain personality if you want to kind of navigate that in a more or less smooth way. And I do think that business gives you a lot of skills, or starting a business, because it's also full of challenges. And not that a job isn't, but I do think that starting a business is generally more difficult, and that you need to develop all sorts of different skills, especially in the beginning, right? You're kind of alone for everything, and you need to, be creative, and you need to think on the spot, and you need to solve problems all the freaking time. And I think there are a lot of life lessons in there, and it's certainly, for me, part of the motivation to do what I do and to be involved in business, because it's I think it's just growth. I feel like I grow as a person through that.
Yeah, I can definitely, but I can only speak from my experience, but business for me has been transformational. It's like when I look back at the time that I started, because I was a shy kid. Like I definitely was shy. I would say I'm an extroverted introvert. I don't know if other people think that or not, but I see myself as that. And the first day on that shop floor, like, I didn't even have the courage or the confidence to go speak to a customer. I was like so nervous of like having to serve a customer. Like, I was petrified, but like, even that in itself was like, it brought me out of my shell, and I had to make the first approach to that customer. I had to say hello, and I had to try and sell, as well as build a relationship. So it taught me so much about communication, being able to communicate effectively, and also how to listen to people about their challenges, or just even if they just want to talk, So, and as we all know, communication, I think, is the number one skill that we need in life for business, because if you can have a great idea, a great business, but if you can't communicate it effectively, then it's nothing.
Yeah, communication, definitely one of them. That's interesting. Is there anything else that you think we should talk about? I think we've covered pretty much your story and quite a few other interesting subjects. Maybe, so I have one more question, and then if you think there's anything else you want to talk about, we can also open any other subject. Would you highlight any one book or person or thing that influenced you the most, that influenced the most your career? Let's say business. I think for me, growing up, I always admired Richard Branson. Yeah, so he was like one of the first books I read too. And I didn't start reading books till I was like mid-20s, but I always looked up to him because he just seemed to achieve like so much so fast. And even his story, I don't know if you've read it or not, but he ended up in jail too, because he was trying to like use the rules to his advantage, where he was like going across to the mainland Europe, buying CDs and then not getting the tax back or whatever, and then selling them on in the stores. And he was doing the same thing, advertising the discs online and selling them before he was getting the payment before like postal order at the time, So like I seen similarities in a sense, and he's just an amazing guy. I think he's got a great energy about him, and for me, he definitely was someone that I took a huge interest in. And I think if anyone out there is like looking to start a business, I would definitely recommend this book. I think it's Losing My Virginity. Yeah.
I think
he might even have a few of them, but I think that's his main his autobiography or so.
That's the first one. And
he's good also at just living this kind of rock star lifestyle, right?
Yeah. And he seems to be loved too. Yeah, like obviously he is very considerate and caring, and I know there's other people out there in the business world who are building world-leading companies, and not everyone would have nice things to say. But Richard Branson just seems to do no wrong, in everything he does, and seems to be just an all-round nice, down-to-earth guy, despite all his success.
Yeah,
and. Success is what we make of it.
He's a good one.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Cool. Did you want to talk about anything else? Do we wrap up at this point?
I don't know. Up to you, man.
Maybe we'll
I'm enjoying the conversation.
That is good. Maybe we'll do part 2 at some point. Whatever is going to be the next chapter, right? I'm genuinely really, really looking forward to whatever is coming up. I have no doubt that it's going to be something interesting. So
cool. Yeah, taking my time, and I would say like trying to live in the present moment more and more every day, as opposed to living in the future of like, I want to do this, I want to do that. Because I think a lot of younger people are always looking to that. It's like, I want to be there, instead of just being present and enjoying every single day and every single step of the way, and just being, as opposed to, thinking too much, And I think when we do that, that is how we apply ourselves better, being in that state of flow, and being able to work through every single goal, every single step, one step at a time, as opposed to 10 at a time,
Mic drop. Got nothing else to add. Ryan, thanks for coming on. Finally, really appreciate it.
Man, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Take care. Thanks for listening until the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like the content, please do me a favor and click the like button on YouTube or give us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. Leave a comment, subscribe if you want to hear more from us. That really helps also to get the podcast out there, and that helps me get more interesting guests and create even more interesting content. So I really appreciate if you do that. If you have any other comments, questions, feel free to message me. You can find me on Twitter. That's usually the best channel. The link should be somewhere in the description. And check out my Twitter. I try to tweet interesting stuff about similar content that we talk about on the podcast, key insights from the podcast as well, and just generally stuff that I learn and stuff that I do. So see you. Thanks.